Oi! Who's ready to go down to the land down under? You know, kangaroos, koalas, hey, and Sydney, stuff like that, the Opera House. Oh, that might be the worst Australian accent in all of history. Please roast me in the comments. That was bad, but we're gonna keep this going. So yeah, what's up, everyone? It's your boy Matt Diazable coming at you with some new music reviews. Thank you for coming on by. If you're new and just now discovering me, you the best. You're what keeps me going, discovering new people to share my thoughts and just create something fun here. So yeah, today I am checking out the latest release from a band called Justice for the Damned with their newest album called Stay Relentless. If you've never heard about this band, or you haven't checked out my last review, which I will put down below, I reviewed their last album, Pain is Power. Justice for the Damned is an Australian deathcore metalcore band that started, which I'm really surprised I didn't check before, but back in 2011. These guys have been grinding it out. They've been working hard. So kudos to them. They are based out of Sydney, Australia, and this is their latest album, which is their third release. They've put out two other albums. I think this newest one is a self-released album. I can't seem to see if there's any label backing on it or anything, but it seems like the band is, doing their own thing with this album. And speaking of doing their own thing, one thing I've always noticed about this band is that they have really good merch, because if I'm correct, the main vocalist of this band works for a merch company, and he has a keen eye for fashion and just trends and everything. He has his own clothing brand. He does a lot of print work. And so Justice for the Damned have always had really great merch, which I've always admired, been inspired by them, because they make great stuff. Go check out their stuff if you can. But yeah, I discovered this band. I've always heard about them because I know that a lot of bands tour Australia, so I would see their name a lot, especially with like Kubla Khan. They always go on tour together. But I never really did fully check them out until I started this channel. And then in 2023, I was in Germany at the time, and they were on tour with the band Malevolence, Guilt Trip, Silas, and I just happened to, I don't know how, but yeah, I just went to the show and just got to meet some of the guys and everything. And surprisingly, throughout the years, every time they're in the States or somewhere, I'm always happen to be at their shows and stuff, and I'm always just running into them. So really great guys and everything. So if you guys are checking this out, Justice for the Damned, y'all are dope dudes. So let's talk about your newest album, Stay Relentless. Like I mentioned before, I reviewed their last album, Pain is Power, a while ago. And on that album, the band seemed to be really crafting a very brutal sound through very heavy breakdowns, very stomping and groovy riffs, and just a raw intensity that you don't really see too often. It was a record that just lived and breathed to be heavy. With this latest album, Stay Relentless, the Australian deathcore band seemed to be a little bit more leaner and a little bit more focused in their craft, but in the same time, it feels like something's been lost in this new sound that they're making here. As they say, something's lost in translation. Across this album, there are moments of, the sharpest songwriting they've ever done and some of the heaviest drum work that the band has ever recorded. But it seems to be struggling a little bit because there's some production choices here that feel like it makes the album feel a little bit hollow at times. And there's this weird, familiar like level of song structure that you get over and over again on this album. So it feels like each time you kind of hear the same song, it feels like it's dulling the impact each time. The opening song, Retribution in Blood, really sets a tone with some very massive, almost tribal-like sounding drums, and some very deep and gravelly-like vocals that seem darker and more commanding than ever. The riffs are hitting hard on this song. The bass brings, a deep heftiness to the band and everything, but something about it has a weird hollowness to it in the mix, and it's very noticeable in the slower, more drum-driven parts of this song. When the band really kind of like locks in, they sound crushing. But compared to their last album, Pain is Power, where, everything from start to finish was surprisingly relentless and unrelenting. Like it just never gave way. It was just heavy on heavy. Here, there's a lot of space between the songs, and it feels like that heaviness is kind of gone and empty. And that weird tension kind of continues to be a very reoccurring thing on this album. Built to Be Broken is probably one of the most pit-ready songs on this album, with more raw and more projected screams than before. And the breakdown on this song is very groovy, it's very heavy, and it's very reminiscent of the band Kubla Khan. They're taking, it seems like, a lot of, what they're doing from that band and kind of use it in their own style here. Every Lie Spoken really pushes that new kind of style of shorter, more clean-cut songwriting that they're presenting on this album. But here, it's backed up by some really bolstering backing vocals and very sharp guitar work. But again, the slicker, production they have here is just making you wish they would have that grit they had on their last record here. Even the title track, Stay Relentless, with its, dissonant style guitar work and very wild drum fills, can't really escape that weird emptiness that that's just plaguing this album. And while I've been a little critical about this album, I will say there are some really good things on here on Stay Relentless, and that is probably like the drum work and the overall low end grooviness they have here at times. Across the board, I gotta give it up to the drums. They are the real driving force for this album, whether it's very explosive drum work on the song The Current, or more snare heavy snaps on the song Ghosts of Tomorrow, or even on the eerie blast beat centric song of Clawing Wounds. And that last song, Clawing Wounds, it really reminds me of like late 2000s Emure, in terms of like just how the drums are just hitting really hard here, complete with very eerie vocal overlays. And on this song, the breakdown, it finally, out of all the breakdowns on this record, it finally hits with so much weight that the rest of the record seems to be missing or reaching for. Again, not everything really connects on this album. One particular song is Cry Wolf, which kind of leans into the same song structures, and so you get that diminishing return of like, you feel like you're hearing the same song a bit over and over again. And then you have the song Eyes of a Killer, which show the band kind of struggling with more slower and more atmospheric pacing. And I feel like these moments should feel very grand and feel very, something more to them, but they kind of fall flat a little bit. But towards the end of this album, the last two tracks, Massive Liars and Leave You Behind, really have a very cohesive feel to them. So at least the album ends on a really strong point. Here they have some more layered vocals, and the guitar interplay and the overall heftier production here finally gives the band some weight that, that it's just been missing from this whole album. They feel very full here. Compared to Pain is Power, Stay Relentless feels less primal compared to Pain is Power, but it is a little bit more calculated. The shorter songs, the sharper drums, and the leaner vocal delivery really show that the band has really grown in terms of discipline. But, that comes at a price, because some of that grit they had before is kind of lost in the sauce. The drums really do dominate this album really well, but I guess because they're such a very prominent thing in this album, that they can lean into being a bit predictable at times. And again, the production, it's very polished, it's very clear, but sometimes it undermines the band's like raw heaviness that they need. And so a lot of the record feels a little bit like it's just lost and just a little bit all over the place. And so I feel like the trade-off with this album is, it's a step forward in terms of precision, but it's a step backwards in terms of impact, because Justice for the Damned remain a force in the heavy, like metal space in terms of jaw-dropping heaviness and just pit-destroying breakdowns. But their choice to go with a more cleaner route this time feels like the album feels just a little bit hollow and empty. At its best, it can prove to you that, they have evolved beyond Pain is Power. But at its worst, it makes you miss, the grind, the grit that made their record from before just so devastating. So it's a very mixed bag with this newest Justice for the Damned album. So I would have to give it an okay to decent. 6.5 out of 10. Tell me your thoughts down below. What's your favorite Australian band? Is there any new Australian bands I should be checking out? And until next time, guys, see you in the pit. Good things about you.